Welcome back to the Exhausted docuseries. I'm Dr. Pedram Shojai.
And I'm Nick Palizzi. In the first couple of episodes, we learned a lot about why we're tired, the role that our cells play, and how food can really help us turn the tables and thrive. Today, we're delving into things that rob us of our energy.
The world we live in is increasingly dirty, and our lives are just full of stress.
This has created new challenges for our tired bodies to deal with.
And that's when many of us turn to stimulants. Caffeine, it's a double-edged sword in many ways, and it feels like our society just can't function without it. We're going to look at the pros and cons so you can make better choices for your health.
A short-term burst of energy may feel okay, but what if it's at the expense of lowering our baseline energy every day? That's a big part of the issue. Think of it as deficit spending by the government. You can only print money for so long. Yes, there are those who swear by what they get from caffeine in their lives. It gives us clarity and a boost of energy. But is it sustainable? Pedram now takes us into this great caffeine debate.
When we need energy, we feel like we need it now, like this instant. The gratification is great until the fireworks go away. In this next segment, our experts talk about caffeine and stimulants. We need to understand the downside of their overuse so we can strike the right balance in our own lives. Some people don't have the genetics to process caffeine as well, and others, well, we're just hooked on it and it's too much of a good thing. Let's explore.
What you are being told in media is incorrect. What appears on your feed is incorrect by and large. You're being told that for energy, you should drink high sugar, high caffeine-related energy drinks, and nothing is further from the truth. Those drinks will indeed increase your risk for long-term disease and increase your risk of dying early.
Coffee's it's an interesting subject, and it's not all black and white. You know, you see a lot of people out there who are saying coffee is amazing, it's a superfood, it's got, all these great phytochemicals in it, and has this benefit and that benefit and this benefit. There's a lot of truth in that. There's also people saying coffee is the devil and it's terrible for me and I feel worse and it's having this bad effect and this bad effect and so on. And there's a lot of reports also of people going off coffee and saying, thank God I feel so much better. What there's not a lot of are people out there who are making sense of that whole picture. So here's the reality. First, it's true that there are many different long-term health benefits associated with coffee consumption. So reductions in diabetes or various types of cancer, heart disease, you can find a lot of associations like that with coffee consumption. That's true. At the same time, there's the context of the effect on energy levels and brain function. So mood and energy, and physical and mental performance. This is the tricky part, because when people take coffee, they experience an immediate boost in their brain clarity and in their energy levels and in their physical and mental performance. So we all experience that very clearly, and we all say, wow, this is amazing. This is very clearly giving me a boost. And if you track this on, if you sort of have a visual for this and you look at this on a graph and you say, here's sort of the timeline over the course of the day or a few hours, and here's the effect of coffee. So a normal person, their energy levels and their mood and their function might sort of look like this over the course of the day. It's kind of, sort of a flat line. If you take coffee, you add it to that mix, and you give a person who doesn't normally take coffee, if you give them that coffee or caffeine, it looks like this. Instead of the flat line, it goes up, and you get a nice boost, and then it comes back down. That sounds like a really good thing. There's lots and lots of research to show that that is true, that coffee or caffeine consumption absolutely does have that effect. Here's the problem. That's only short-term coffee consumption and caffeine consumption.
Well, you see patients that suffer from exhaustion. Is coffee often a big part of their day?
The patients that I see, they usually are at the point where they can barely drag themselves out of bed in the morning. and they're just like struggling to get to the coffee machine to get the coffee made so that they can drink it and then start thinking about, oh, what do I need to do next? And then they're having to drink coffee throughout the day because the coffee wears off and then their energy starts to go down. So they're drinking more coffee. And then they get later in the day drinking more coffee again to get through that afternoon kind of slump. And then by nighttime, they're so wired that they can't go to sleep. And so then they don't get a good night's sleep. And they're tired again in the morning. And this cycle continues. That is not healthy. It's not normal. And we really don't want to live like that.
In the long term, here's what actually happens. You develop negative neurotransmitter adaptations that actually take your performance from this, so a flat line here, in terms of your mood, energy, and performance, to this. Now you have a flat line here. And so when people take their coffee now, or their caffeine, and they get a boost from it, what's actually happening is if this is their current level of function, and this is where they used to be normally without caffeine, what's happening is that they're getting a boost back up to what used to be their normal level of function. This is the hard part, the insidious part that most people don't see, is that subjectively it feels like they're getting a boost. They are getting a boost, but what they don't realize is that over time, the daily consumption of caffeine has created negative neurotransmitter adaptations in their brain that has actually lowered their baseline level of mood and energy and physical and mental performance.
You're not going to be as mentally clear. You're going to be more forgetful. You're going to be less responsive to your children because you just don't have the energy to go on that bike ride with them or go to the park after work because of that. You're going to miss out on opportunities at work because somebody else is going to beat you to the idea or to that deadline on that project. So you're going to be lagging behind. It's going to impact you in so many different ways. So just you got to stop at some point and realize how it's ruining your life and how much better it could be. And we all know this. People are like, where do they get that energy from? How does she have or he have so much energy? How does that person get so much done in a day? Well, they're probably not doing that with coffee.
You think about coffee, it puts a lot of stress on your body. It actually increases your cortisol levels and increases your blood pressure. And that's why you get like a quick fix from it. But if you do that every day over and over, that can just cause a lot of stress on your body. And what we're really trying to do with having optimal energy levels is we want consistent energy. Most people don't actually want like big surges in their energy and then big crashes. It's just no way to live. So the best way to just get good natural energy is, getting plenty of sleep and making sure you're keeping your blood sugar levels stable by eating plenty of protein and healthy fat along with your carbohydrates. Drinking plenty of water throughout the day. Sometimes we can actually get really fatigued and it can just be dehydration, something that we don't always think of. And then if we reach for a cup of coffee, that's actually going to dehydrate us even more. So it's kind of doing this like double whammy negative effect. So we want to make sure we're, drinking enough water, sleeping, exercising, but not too much, eating well. It's a lot of the basic stuff, but a lot of times, we're just so busy in today's society that we just reach for these quick fixes, which are really damaging in the long run.
Some people can do okay with a little bit of caffeine, and caffeine can be very good for you. It's been shown to help your liver with phase 2 detoxification. I philosophically would say that you have to be very careful with your disposition. What kind of person are you? Why are you drawn to it? Why are you using it? What is the intention behind it? But I do think that certain ones, if you're careful and depending on your constitution, can be helpful. But you listen to your body. If something gives you more anxiety, if you drink coffee and it's giving you loose stools and it's making you anxious and your heart is beating super fast and you're not listening to those cues and you just keep continuing because you read that it's an antioxidant and it's good for you, or that you didn't sleep well last night and you got to push yourself to get through the day today, then eventually those have consequences.
I think everything in balance. And I think when it comes to some of these quick fixes, I think they're good to use when you really need them. The problem is when we need them every single day. So, if you're tired on an afternoon and you want to grab an extra cup of coffee, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's when it turns into every single day and then suddenly, your tolerance goes up and 1 cup doesn't do it. And suddenly you find yourself having 3 or 4 extra cups in the afternoon, which then affects your sleep in the evening, because coffee in the afternoon a lot of times will affect, sleep. If you have coffee, my coffee cutoff is 2:00 p.m. Anything after that will affect my sleep. And for a lot of people, it's around the same time. So then you get into the cycle of then you're not sleeping and then you reach for more coffee the next day, and it can really, mess up your body's natural energy cycle. So I think using these fixes occasionally is fine, but just not when we're depending on them every single day.
How do coffee and stimulants in general affect our blood sugar levels?
Almost all the stimulants that people use, one way or another, promote increases in blood sugar. So that's what it finally boils down to. So whether it's some stimulating plant, coffee, any other source of caffeine, something like that, or just sugar itself, that ends up with an increase in blood sugar. That doesn't heal anything, and in fact, it's quite damaging. Going on that sugar roller coaster is what's caused us to have this epidemic of diabetes that we've had over the last couple generations. So stimulants aren't in and of themselves harmful per se at modest doses. If you're drinking a cup of coffee a day, it's probably within, some reasonable amount. But you start to get up above those kinds of amounts, and it draws energy that your body otherwise could be using for other things. And everybody's familiar with the crash that happens after that. And of course, most people just eat more sugar or drink more coffee at that point. Far better to use more long-term stamina-enhancing remedies that support healing and balance over time, so you have good natural energy and don't have to use the stimulants.
Let's say we choose to get off coffee, energy drinks, and stimulants. What can we do to boost our energy?
So you've been a stimulant junkie. Somebody loves coffee and they want to know some options about what they can do to get themselves off of coffee. And we have to ask ourselves, why are you craving coffee? Are you craving it as a stimulant? Are you craving it for the dopamine? Or are you creating it for the bitter taste that it gives you? So that's a couple questions to ask yourself. What is it about coffee? Is it the ritual? Because if it's the ritual of drinking something hot, maybe we can switch to a high polyphenol like green tea. Organic green tea would be much better for you than coffee in some ways.
I'm not opposed to caffeine, and for people that can metabolically tolerate it, they might be fine. But what about the people that are drinking Red Bull, 3 cans of Red Bull a day? That's so bad for your heart, right? It really overstimulates the heart. And eventually that person's going to get an arrhythmia, their blood pressure is going to go up. So they're going to get into trouble with it. I don't see that as big a problem with black tea, and much less so with matcha. I think matcha is a pretty good solution for people. Why is that? Because the caffeine is balanced with L-theanine. There's this chemical called L-theanine, and when you combine it with caffeine, it seems to blunt the toxic negative effects of the caffeine. So matcha is kind of an ideal drink. Just talking about it makes me want to go out and have a cup. I mean, I love the taste of it, et cetera. It should be organic and clean. So I'm less worried about people overdoing it with matcha. I'm more worried about caffeine because it's in Nodos, it's in Red Bull. It's so easy to get way too much of it.
Sometimes people crave coffee for the bitter aspect, where it's going to help their digestion. And so chicory, that's a really great way. Other Swedish bitters, there's all kinds of, eating bitter greens like dandelion or burdock. Some of these herbs or salads like bitter leafy greens are going to be really good for helping digestion if you're relying on coffee, not just for a stimulant, but also for a digestive aid to help you stay regular. So I'd say that bitters would be a better option. And if you're looking for the dopamine, go for that L-tyrosine. But of course, under the care of a good doctor.
I've found matcha green tea is a great substitute because unlike coffee that oftentimes gives you that spike and the crash, oftentimes with the jitters, matcha green tea gives you a nice bell curve of energy with no crash, and I have not found any evidence to suggest that it's habit forming. Has just a fraction of the caffeine that coffee does. But the nice thing about matcha green tea, it's a ceremonial green tea from Japan. It's in whole leaf form. So it's a wonderful way of giving your body antioxidants and catechin chemicals, known as catechins, that are cancer fighting, fat burning, and of course energy boosting.
There are multiple stimulants that are like, I think, methylxanthine, so guarana. You know, people will say, oh, it's Brazilian mate. You drink my mate with my guarana in it. You know what? It's metabolized the same way. I mean, we're basically talking about the same effects in the body, right? So they're all part of this methylxanthine class of chemicals. Theobromine and tea, you know, all of these are chemically related. But caffeine, I believe, is the most potent of all of them.
The matcha green tea latte that my wife and I put together in our Essential Oils diet book is 2 teaspoons of whole leaf matcha and 1 cup of hot boiling water, 1 cup of a milk substitute. We like unsweetened coconut or unsweetened almond. I like to put 3 droppers full of stevia, which I love stevia, my natural sweetener. I'll do a 1/4 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice, about 1/4 teaspoon of a Himalayan salt, and 1 drop of cinnamon essential oil and 1 drop of peppermint. And I mix that up in a Ninja or a Vitamix. And it's so easy to make. And that's my latte. And it's wonderful. And the nice thing about the peppermint, we've talked already about a few times, it's natural, energy booster. It actually helps curb hunger. That's another benefit to people that might be overweight, is that lethargy usually happens. So we want to help stop overeating, because overeating can actually cause fatigue too. It's a hunger curbing agent, gives that natural boost to energy. Cinnamon is so important because it balances the blood sugar and increases insulin sensitivity, and actually helps your body reach homeostasis. So if your blood sugar isn't high all the time, you're not going to crave the sugars, you're not going to crave extra food, which will then help give you more enhanced energy. It essentially eases your metabolism. That's a wonderful latte. And if you want it on ice, then what you do is you basically cut the water, and then you make it and you put the recipe over a glass of ice and then allow it to get cold. It's yummy.
What stimulants do is long-term, they deplete you. They're actually not a source of true energy. They are making your body push itself to make more energy. So it's not a true source of energy. People think they're adding on top, let's say the cup is empty and they're adding energy to you. And it's sort of this misconception because they're called energy drinks, but it's actually, it should be called pushing your body to do more drinks. And if you can imagine, if someone's needing that, that usually is a sign that they're already in a state of going downhill. So you don't want to keep pushing the body to do that, like a car that's barely got any fuel left and you take it out and you're just ramping it on and going super fast. Well, it's going to burn out. And so what happens eventually with these people is they burn out. And if they don't, they just keep pushing and needing more and more and more. And one of the signs is, you know, people will say, I can have coffee any time of the day and I'll actually fall asleep. And that's a huge sign that your adrenals are burnt out. You're no longer even responding correctly to a stimulant. So caffeine, for example, makes that little bit of adrenaline, cortisol that you have stick around longer. It's pushing the adrenals to secrete and make that cortisol stay around longer. Well, the poor adrenals not getting fixed. You know, the issue at hand, the core issue that you had, the root cause, isn't being addressed. So it's really a quick fix that can lead to a lot of problems. So I would say it's an American culture, or, you know, North American culture that we live in, again, because we are pushing ourselves to do too much.
Too much of a good thing isn't. Having sustained energy all day means making some adjustments to our caffeine and sugar intake. And as we just learned, there's some great alternatives to coffee. For most of us, it doesn't mean cutting it out altogether, just striking a better balance. It's important to find that sweet spot and make sure we're on the right side of health. Caffeine and sugar have taken too big a role in our daily diets, and it's time to scale that back a bit. Here's some of the key takeaways to remember from this segment. As we eat more and more sugar, we secrete more insulin, which eventually overwhelms our cells' ability to shuttle in sugars. When our cells shut the gates to insulin, we develop insulin resistance and pancreatic exhaustion. Insulin resistance eventually leads to increased blood sugar, which binds to proteins in a process called glycation, leading to inflammation. Glycation is measured by hemoglobin A1C, a powerful marker of inflammation. L-theanine helps temper the impacts of caffeine in matcha tea. L-tyrosine can be helpful for some people to wean off of coffee. Chicory, Swedish bitters, dandelion, and burdock are all good digestive aids in replacing coffee. Peppermint oil can help blunt hunger, and cinnamon helps balance blood sugar.
The information in this series is fresh, up-to-date, and designed to help you take control of your health and well-being. We've designed the entire thing to empower you to make some simple changes and start feeling better today. When you purchase the series, it comes with all the episodes, slides of the takeaways, audio recordings, transcripts, and several powerful resources that we've amassed for you. Again, all designed to help you get more energy back right away. This includes our bonus resource on healthy coffee substitutes. Please take a moment to purchase the series now. That way, you'll have immediate access to all the episodes at your convenience. This free screening is our way of helping get this information out to millions of people during a limited time. But when you purchase the series, you get to keep it all and use the resources every day. It also helps support the work we're doing so we can continue to bring this type of rich content to more people. Thank you for your support. Oh man, this next segment is near and dear to my heart. Carbs, just like Mama Palizzi used to make on Sundays. Carbs, carbs, and more carbs with tomato sauce.
You gotta forgive this guy, he's Italian.
Hey, we humans need a certain amount of carbs in our diet. That is fact. But how much and which kind?
We're about to explore the inner mechanics of how your body turns food into energy. Look, we've all heard of carbohydrates and have probably also heard of simple versus complex carbohydrates. But how are these carbohydrates converted by our bodies into energy?
A big part of this healing journey is to shift our mindsets and really begin to investigate all the miraculous inner workings behind the most outwardly simple actions of our day. Like eating a bowl of pasta, for example. Your body is an incredible machine, performing millions of tasks each second. This leaves a lot of room for misfires if you're not giving it the right fuel. Pedram, where do we start?
In this case, we're going to be chasing a bite of food and observing what happens as your body reacts to that decision and mobilizes to make the best use of that fuel. With each forkful of your lunch, a glorious digestive dance takes place that would boggle your mind. And as we're about to see, there are many more processes at play here than you might think.
We live in a very toxic world, no doubt. And it's a world that is unlike anything that has confronted our ancestors. Therefore, we've really not evolved the detoxification safeguards to allow us to perfectly deal with all this stuff to which we are exposed.
Why are we fatigued? Why is your brain fatigued? Why is your thyroid fatigued? Why are your adrenals fatigued? Because we're fighting the stress of all of these toxic chemicals that the body has no mechanism to protect you from. We have no mechanism. We have the exact same body as our ancestors thousands of years ago. We have the same kidneys, they work just the same gallbladder, the same immune system. What did the immune system of our ancestors have to protect us from? Bugs, parasites, viruses, molds, fungus, and bacteria. That was it. There was no polysorbate 80 or red dye number 42 or mercury or lead that was in high concentrations. There was none of that. But today, our bodies are having to fight thousands of chemicals every single day.
Toxins they negatively impact our energy because it's a burden. Like imagine you're hiking up a really steep incline and it's just you, right? You're pretty able to do it. Now weight yourself down with a 50-pound backpack and you're trying to, navigate with your dogs and you have all these factors that are distracting you from actually getting to the top. So that's what toxins, they're a distraction. The body was kind of designed to eliminate toxins as it goes and just continue to, eliminate a toxin, return to balance. Eliminate something else, return to balance. And that was in a time when the planet was like a lot cleaner. The Great Barrier Reef, a third of it is dissolved in the last 20 years because of an overload of toxins. So all of a sudden, we're trying to have the same momentum and process things in the same way, but we're just overloaded with, new products. All of a sudden, water comes in plastic bottles. Plastic can kind of imbue toxins into the things. There are airplanes spraying chemtrails in the air, which we're then inhaling. They're giving us electromagnetic frequencies that throw our body out of balance that we've never had before.
I think that, clearly there are plenty of toxins that people are aware of, lead, mercury, glyphosate in our food. One area that I think is beginning to get much more attention is air pollution. And when we now see the incredible increase of risk, for example, of dementia based upon proximity to a busy highway, that information is very, very important. These 2.5 micrometer particles that people are exposed to that really aren't very much evaluated in terms of the pollution levels that are reported and the daily air quality indices that are published. We recognize now that these particles are powerfully involved in increasing inflammation, both indirectly by increasing inflammation in the lungs and then throughout the body, but also directly getting into the brain through what's called the cribriform plate. That's an area where the nerves for smell are in the nose, and it's a direct communication with the brain.
There is an article that came out in the medical journal Pediatrics. Now, if you get an article published in Pediatrics, if you're an author and you get published in Pediatrics, it's like, yes, because it's a first-tier journal and it's really an honor. But this article was a policy statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And what they said was that the Toxic Substance Control Act of 1976 failed to protect children and adults, but failed to protect children. Why? That is the regulation, the body of regulations that currently still, 40 years later, regulates the chemical industry in the United States. And what they said in the policy statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics is that the legislation that regulates chemicals in our country is so cumbersome. It's only been used to regulate 5 chemicals or classes of chemicals in 40 years. 5 chemicals, that's it. Nothing else is regulated.
Wow, that's scary. Is there any new research now on certain chemicals that may be causing problems?
60 to 65% clinically of all Alzheimer's patients that are diagnosed are inhalation Alzheimer's. It's what they're breathing that's triggering the inflammation in the brain that eventually kills off so many brain cells, and you get all that plaque. It's called Alzheimer's. 60 to 65% is because of the air pollution of what we're breathing. That's indoor air and outside air. The EPA is not a regulating body. The EPA is trying to protect the environment, but they can't prove, they don't have the funds to do the research to prove what chemicals are toxic, which ones are not.
Don't the manufacturers who are utilizing or producing these products have the funds to test these chemicals?
Manufacturers do not have to demonstrate safety of chemicals. They do not at all. They don't have to demonstrate studies that have been accumulated on this particular chemical. They don't have to do any of it. So the EPA has no data by which to regulate the chemicals because there's no requirement. Companies can make a chemical and put it in the carpet that comes out this year, and we're inhaling these chemicals when the carpet's outgas.
We have the toxins that are all around us, whether it's the toxins in the air, food, water supply. We have toxins that are EMFs, electromagnetic fields, which a lot of experts around the world say is probably the single greatest threat to mankind, especially with the new, everybody having more and more cell phones, more iPads, more everything, they're all interconnected. And then you talk about 5G and, microwave, it just goes on. And people do not realize that every cell in our body is able to transmit and receive energy. So we're energetic beings. So this aberrant energy is probably not good for us. And if you talk to experts physicists who have worked with these things, microwave technology and all these other, come on, Why does an X-ray technician wear a little monitor on themselves just to do x-rays because we know it's toxic, okay? So we need to be mindful on a regular basis what we're doing.
Increasingly, people in natural healing are focusing more and more on toxins. The emphasis over the past, let's say 25 years in modern natural healing has really been about chronic subclinical nutritional deficiencies, and that's very, very important. But the consensus is slowly changing right around now to the overwhelming impact of toxins in our environment. We're up at about 80,000 chemicals that have been produced by humans, and if we go back 100 years, there were zero. Everything was natural in the natural world. We might be exposed to a few things that we would call toxins, poisonous mushrooms, breathing smoke from a fire, something like that. But that would be pretty rare. Now these 80,000 man-made substances, most of which haven't been tested at all, and they certainly haven't been tested in combination, are impacting our body because they're not supposed to be there. So the body just doesn't know what to do with them. And largely they cause oxidation, which leads to inflammation. Oxidation, inflammation, basically the same thing. So our body ends up being damaged molecule by molecule. Most of these 80,000 toxins are not in and of themselves that damaging, probably in the doses we experience them, but all around us, they're there. So they're in your clothes, in your furniture, in the paint on the walls, certainly in the air, in the food that we eat, the air we breathe, the water that we drink. Any given one, microscopic amounts, but they add up over time. And we're able to measure these toxins now in people's bodies, and they're in our waterways and in fish in the ocean, and everybody's becoming much more aware of where those things are. They just have their long-term cumulative damage.
The most resounding toxin that most human beings, I'd say probably everyone, is emotional toxicity, emotional conflicts that we deal with. And the most important time is from birth, or I even think conception, to 5 years, and this is what the latest studies show. So what I have found in all these years of 33 years of working is that if we don't have emotional attunement, we really don't know who we are, and we don't understand why we do the things we do to ourselves, we can't move forward. And I believe that that's probably one of the single greatest avenues that I focus on now, is making sure that is in order. And I'll tell you why. Whether you have cancer, whether you have heart disease, whether you have obesity, whether you have any chronic illness, even autoimmune, there is an emotional component. Our head is connected, and we are the architect of the thoughts. And whatever we think, it tells our cells what to think, what to say, what to do, how to act, and so forth. And we know stress causes a cascade of negative reactions. And we all have it. It doesn't mean that we're bad. It just means that we have things. We're all here we're all a work in progress, and we're all here for growth, development, and self-enlightenment. And there is nothing greater than that. And that's not just with if you combine that with our emotions and then the rest of our system, there can be just this unbelievable harmony and flow. And I know because I see it every day in what I do.
What I'm realizing here is that toxins are a much bigger problem than we once might have thought. Are there early signs of toxicity? Are there ways to detox? Or maybe even methods to avoid toxins to begin with?
So I think of toxins, every single day in the food that we're eating and the air that we're breathing. There's even a lot of toxins we can't avoid that are just out there and entering our body, and they can really bog us down. So if we're not taking the steps to clear them out, then what happens is they end up just accumulating in our tissues and really weighing down our body. And when I think of that, I think of like physical weight. It can cause issues with losing stubborn pounds. It can actually pack on pounds by having these toxins pile up. And then with our energy levels, for sure, it's hard to be energetic when your body is trying to clear, this buildup of toxins. So instead of doing like a big, crazy detox, I think a lot of the detoxes out there are pretty scammy and have people doing some really crazy things, like, drinking only juice for like 60 days or, only taking purple pills for 5 days. There's some really weird detoxes out there. My favorite thing to do is just daily detoxing your body. A few of my favorite ways to do that is, number one, drinking plenty of water, staying hydrated. That's going to really help to support your liver and your kidneys, which are your two main detoxification organs. And secondly, saunas, massages, steam rooms, hot tubs. These are a really good way to excrete out the extra toxins in your body. And then also choosing organic foods when you can is a really, really great way to make sure you're not adding toxins in the food that you're eating. Conventional produce especially can be sprayed with all sorts of chemicals and toxins that can pile up. So if you can choose organic produce, it's a really good way to avoid toxins.
We've got to do our best to breathe cleaner air. Does it mean wearing a mask? Yes, maybe it does. Does it mean deciding where we live? That's, I think, a very important consideration. But let me get back to just the notion of increasing our detoxification pathways. That is something that we can do. There's a lot of chemistry involved here, but let me simplify it by saying some foods work through pretty intricate biochemical pathways to improve our ability to detoxify. And I would put on the top of the list things like the cruciferous vegetables, really very important. Coffee is on that list as well. And avoiding certain foods that tend to deplete or compromise our ability to detoxify and threaten our detoxification systems. And these are foods like sugars and refined carbohydrates.
The two strategies are to try to eliminate the toxins. Like mold is a huge issue for people. If they're living in a house that's full of mold, they either need to fix the mold or move, because they really can't heal as long as they're continuing to be assaulted every day and every night by a toxin. And then the other thing that you can do is help to open up the drainage pathways in your body, kind of the exit routes, right? You would never yell fire in the movie theater with the exit doors closed. So you need to make sure that once you mobilize these toxins, that they can leave the body. So if you think about how toxins leave the cells, first, they need to be in more of an alkaline state. So we talked about coffee as a stimulant. Coffee is incredibly acidic. So if you're consuming a ton of coffee, you're going to be fairly alkaline or acidic, and it's going to be hard for those toxins to be released. Then they go into the lymphatic system. This is a big bottleneck in detoxifying because the lymphatic system doesn't have its own pump. It's not like the heart that pumps blood through the body. It's only moved when you move. This is why dry brushing, actually physically moving your lymph, or jumping on a trampoline that moves your body, yoga, anything that gets, your arms above your head really helps your lymphatic system to move and to drain. And then it drains into the gallbladder, which is another kind of bottleneck in the process, because the gallbladder bile is produced in the liver, and then it's stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. And it's used for two things: to help emulsify your fat and to carry toxins out of your body. And it's supposed to run pretty fluidly like water, but when it gets stagnant, it can be more like molasses. So it really doesn't flow. So the toxins aren't leaving the gallbladder, they're staying stuck. So the more you can help the gallbladder and the bile flow, the easier it is to eliminate toxins. And then the third bottleneck is the gut. Because so many people have compromised digestion, they have leaky gut, there's permeability in the gut where it shouldn't exist. The gallbladder carries the toxins into the small intestine, where it's then eliminated through your stools. But if it stays in the small intestine and gets reabsorbed, then it adds to the toxic burden. So helping to heal the gut, helping to continue, the digestive cascade, your motility wave, making sure that food moves through your system and waste moves through your system. All of those things can help you really open up the pathways so that elimination of toxins flows naturally.
The most fundamental process in natural healing of every traditional system is to detoxify first. The body is really good at healing, repairing, and managing itself if you just let it do that. So it has to have the nutrients that it needs to support all your enzyme systems and the detoxification processes that are naturally there. So your body has two basic functions: detoxification and rebuilding, and it's doing every one of those every second, all day long, with maybe an emphasis a little bit more on one or the other. But most natural healing systems focus on detoxification. Now, these toxins are not only the things from our environment, but they're the things that our body is producing in excess. They might be natural substances that normally should be there, like blood sugar. Slightly high pre-diabetic blood sugar is even more epidemic in our culture now than diabetes. So that's a natural substance, but from a natural healing point of view, that also would be a toxin. Inflammatory substances produced by stress. All these things that are inside our body are damaging. And so natural healing says get rid of those things first and then do the rebuilding. Most Americans have taken in more than they've been able to get out. And so they've had a very slow increase in the buildup of internal toxins from your internal environment and toxins from the external environment. And slowly but surely, we've filled up with those. So we need to detoxify those. But we can't do it aggressively, or we end up creating damage by just recirculating those things. So the modern take on that is to detoxify a little bit, rebuild a little bit, detoxify a little bit more, rebuild a little more, and just getting a little bit more aggressive with each step as we work our way into it. It's not very well understood by our population, and people tend to do overly aggressive detoxification. The waste material isn't getting out. They feel bad for a day or a week or a month, whatever it is, and then they don't end up accomplishing very much. So when you test their laboratory test before and after the detox, you usually haven't accomplished a whole lot because they didn't do it in a very organized way.
Baby steps. There are so many baby steps you have to do. You have to get rid of the plastic storage containers in your kitchen, because when you put leftover chicken in a plastic storage container and put it in the refrigerator, the next day, that chicken's got phthalates in it. You have to get rid of the plastic wrap for the corn on the cob, because the next day, the corn on the cob has got phthalates in it, these toxic chemicals. You get glass containers. And so you go to mileskimball.com and you look at the glass kitchen containers. And you say, oh, that looks good. I like those. And then you go over to Amazon. You say, oh, I like those more. And then so you order those, and you need 3 round ones and 2 square ones and a pie-shaped one for your pies. And then you order them, credit card, you order. That took you an hour. You're done. You're completely done for the week. Every week you allocate 1 hour to learning one more baby step. 1 hour a week. Everybody's got 1 hour a week. 1 hour every Tuesday night after dinner, every Sunday morning after services, whenever it is, but 1 hour a week. There's no one thing you do that's going to turn this around. It's all of the accumulation of all of the little things you do, the base hits, that'll take you a year to 2 years.
Our bodies are not equipped to deal with the barrage of toxins in the modern world. Knowing what to avoid and how to minimize exposure is half the battle. The other half is having a regular lifestyle practice that supports detoxification pathways. Having young children, the onus is on me to protect my kids from these toxins. This curse of our modern age has presented us all with new problems to solve. Here are some of the main points to remember. Toxic particles in the air can lead to inflammation and dementia through the cribriform plate in the brain. The Toxic Control Protection Act of 1976 failed to protect children according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. Because manufacturers have no legal requirement to prove the safety of a chemical they put out, the EPA has no data to work with in assessing the safety of what's out there. Cruciferous vegetables can help keep our detoxification pathways clear. Mold is a powerful endotoxin that impacts many people without us knowing it. Phthalates from plastics can leach into our food through storage containers.
Living in the modern world is death by 1,000 cuts in many ways. There are toxins, stressors, and challenges our ancestors didn't have.
The only way to thrive is to help the body detoxify better while avoiding any additional exposure as best we can.
Think of a nation at war. Resources are drawn from schools, hospitals, roads, and the arts, all sent to the front lines.
A body at war cannot operate at its peak for long, and that's what we're all dealing with. Knowing what to avoid and what helps us is key, and that's what we'll continue to emphasize throughout the series. Our bodies need to live in peace, but sometimes we must do battle with the bad stuff in order to thrive. In this next segment, Pedram's going to introduce some people who've done exactly that and succeeded. Their stories should help humanize all we're learning here and hopefully inspire you on your road to vitality.
Sitting here listening to all these experts, it's easy to think, yeah, that's nice, but you're not in my shoes. So we asked some of our experts to share their personal stories. They've come from all different walks of life and have had their own personal struggles with energy and health. We're all in this together, as you're about to witness.
My story goes back to when I was in school to be a registered dietitian, and it's the time in my life when I was at my lowest point in my energy levels and also in my confidence, and the highest point with my weight, which was really interesting because I was in school learning about metabolism and all of the rules about food and how the body works and all the equations for calories in and calories out, and I was supposed to be studying and learning how to help people be more energetic and how to lose weight and keep it off. And what happened was I was implementing everything I was learning, like a really good student. You know, we were learning like about counting your calories and how many calories you need a day. So I was cutting my calories and I was eating low fat and just being really, really diligent. I was exercising like crazy, like sometimes a couple times a day. And I noticed that my energy levels just continued to go down and the scale continued to go up. I just felt exasperated because I thought I was doing all of the right things, everything that I was learning. And I didn't just gain like 2 or 3 or 5 pounds, but it was like 10, 15, 20, almost 25 pounds I gained by following the low calorie, low fat diet. And I could barely even think. I was so tired all day long. And the only thing that really helped me with my energy levels at all was workouts, which I found was kind of nice because I was trying to burn off all these extra calories, but then it just seemed like a couple hours later I would just be exhausted again.
I had mercury poisoning from living in China and didn't know it for a number of years. I developed severe fatigue, real cognitive impairment. I couldn't focus, I couldn't think, my sleep was disrupted, my immune system started going wacky, my gut was a mess, I started getting rashes all over. And it took me a number of years to figure out that it was the mercury. And once I started treating myself for the mercury and fixing my gut and cleaning up my diet, I was able to recover from chronic fatigue syndrome, which often people can't. I've had other patients, for example, who have tick infections like Lyme disease, and it's often undiagnosed. And when we treat them, they get better. Or I've had patients with low-grade thyroid problems. 1 in 5 women have a low thyroid function, and half of them aren't diagnosed. 1 in 10 men have the same thing. And even the tests we do in traditional medicine don't really look at it properly. And they need to be treated and they get better. I've seen patients with nutritional deficiencies, whether it's B12 or vitamin D. They can be treated pretty easily with the right nutrients to help them recover their energy. So it's really about personalizing medicine and personalizing health to get the result.